Welcome to Content with Character, the weekly podcast that'll give you the momentum you need to create content with more ease, clarity, and laughter. I'm your host, content copywriter Emily Aborn, and I'm all about unconventional marketing approaches. I believe in your big ideas, and I'm excited to help you share them in a way that's distinctly you. Have you ever experienced a creativity desert? Like you're sitting there trying to come up with ideas or content or write a single darn sentence, and the only thing coming out of you is the hair that you've been tearing out. Call it writer's block, the creativity wells run dry, or maybe just nothing. This episode will help you unblock the creative block, give you writer's unblock, if you will, by showing you how to spark some creativity, find some inspiration, and get those ideas flowing. Hi, welcome back. This is going to be a fun and hopefully short and sweet episode today. So to kick us off, I just want to officially share about the little review contest I've decided to do. If you've been listening faithfully, you know a couple of weeks ago, I alluded to the fact that I might be doing a review contest, a contest around reviews, and now I'm doing it. And I've decided what it's going to be. So for anyone that writes Content with Character, a loving review from now until August 1st, 2023, or if you've already written Content with Character, a loving review, you will be entered to win a gift related to today's episode. I will pick out specific for you and something that I think that is going to help you personally get your inspirational juices flowing. Ew, that sounds gross, but just go with me. Anyway, it's going to help spark your creativity, and I will hand pick something for you. So basically, you're going to get a gift in the mail from me that applies to today's episode and conjuring up some extra creativity. This will also apply to past reviewers, as I said, and because of that, I want to read this amazing review from our listener, Shelly. Shelly says, I highly recommend this podcast. Emily has a wonderful way of reframing what many of us entrepreneurs shy away from, sharing what we are up to with the world. As an ADHD coach who loves working one-to-one with clients instead of writing about the work or doing content marketing, I appreciate how Emily geeks out on content, copy, marketing, and more, and sheds light on what they really mean and how to start thinking differently about content. I super duper appreciate you listening and your review. So if you would like to be entered, all you have to do henceforth is go onto Apple Podcasts and rate and review the show. And like I said, I will pick a winner on Tuesday, August 1st. And then I'll announce the winner in that next episode on the 8th, Tuesday the 8th. So why do I ask you for your reviews? Well, there's a couple of reasons. A, it helps me to stay inspired. Fittingly, as we're going to get into today, and I will share some ideas around, or some pieces around that. B, it also helps Apple Podcasts know that I am a relevant piece of content. So when people are searching for podcasts on content, entrepreneurship, visibility, marketing, content, copy, etc., this helps Apple know that I exist and that I'm producing episodes and I'm doing them regularly and people are listening. And C, I love knowing what you love. I love knowing where maybe you need creative inspiration so that I can keep doing more of that for you and giving you value. So thank you in advance because you writing me a review helps me help you. Okay, on to today's topic. If you don't know me, we haven't met yet. This is your first time here, let's say. I am Emily. I'm a content copywriter and podcast host of this podcast, Content with Character, as well as the She Built This podcast. Fun little fact about me, I absolutely love summer. I love it. It is my favorite season of all time. I wish I lived in a land of eternal summer and I never had to deal with the other three, quite honestly. I look forward to summer all winter long. I pine for it as spring drags on, and I cry. I actually legit cry when it starts to become fall because it means that winter is coming and summer is about to be gone. I love summer. I love it. But here in New Hampshire, this summer has not been very pleasing to me. It has been off to a really doozy start. So first off, it rained pretty much all of June, which is when summer officially started. I think June 1st was a sunny day. You know what? I remember June 1st was a sunny day because I sat outside wearing a dress with no sleeves with my husband and my father-in-law, and we were celebrating his birthday. But then I think after that, like it's just been 2 thumbs down since then. I can't remember a single absolutely purely sunny day since then. Rain, overcast, bad air quality, temperatures just not quite creeping up to my zone of liking, and just like this overall blah. I'm exaggerating a bit, taking a little creative license here. There have been some sunny days, but for the majority of the days, it's been raining. So what I think happened is that June got its you-know-what in a wad and got itself confused with April. That's pretty much what I think was happening, because June was acting a whole lot like April. So as a result of the bad weather and probably like a sprinkle of existential crisis, which maybe is another story for another day, maybe not, I don't know, I was just not having a very creative month. Like looking back at my calendar, I just see day after day after day where I'm like, oh, I was not getting into a routine that day or a groove. And it was just really, I wasn't able to energetically generate creativity like I normally do. And it was really, really frustrating. So here are 3 things I was able to put my finger on for me specifically that I think were taking over. They were to blame. And then we're going to go into some of how we can re-spark this creativity when life happens, weather happens. We're just not feeling it. So the first thing that was happening for me is I was struggling with some things internally. I was like asking myself some of these big life questions and having down thoughts and doubts and all of these things. So as a result, it was a bit all encompassing for my brain. Like my brain was focusing on all of this overthinking, and a whole lot less energy was I had a lot less energy to pour into creativity and my creative output. What you have going on in your personal life really does affect your business and your creative output. Number 2, I had a client deadline that was really, really expansive. And sometimes it can be hard to be creative with that big of a deadline. Like sometimes a tight deadline can be very stressful, but this one was just so humongous, so long, I kept procrastinating, which I will get into in this episode, and how that can actually stunt creativity. And then lastly, I was both overwhelmed and also underwhelmed with my schedule. Like I had said yes to too much, and there was a lot of stuff on my calendar, but it was like a lot of fluff. So as a result, I had to move things around, jump around almost every day, task switch, change my plan for the day, adapt. Like it was a little bit just overwhelming and not like I like to operate. Not how I get my best creative work done. I didn't have those long work blocks that I really, really use for my creative time. And at the same time, the work that I had was like a little underwhelming. It was like research and mundane little tasks. And it just sort of felt like there wasn't a lot going on. And there was also a lot going on, which I know that's hard to make sense of. But anyway, suffice it to say, it was all weird. So maybe you relate to those from the past month, or maybe you just relate to those in general. And you're like, yes, I can totally see how those things would put a damper on someone's creativity. Maybe you sit down on the regular and you go to write content, plan your content, send an email, write a podcast, chapter for your book, and you just feel like, oh my God, the creative well has run dry, nothing's coming to you, and then you just close it and don't do it. So what I wanted to create in this episode for you is some ideas on how to unblock that writer's block, unblock that creativity block, writer's unblock, if you will, creative unblock. And this could relate to pretty much anything creative that you do. So we're going to answer these questions for you. How do you spark creativity? How do you find inspiration? And I have a lot of ideas for you, a couple resources at the end, and even resources I didn't mention in today's episode. For the sake of time, I also included some more of those in the show notes. So first off, I would highly encourage you to go easy on yourself, because I think that the moment we start beating ourselves up and using negative self-talk and saying like, why me? Why can't I get inspired? Why don't I feel creative? Why don't I have XYZ? That is the moment creativity hears you and it hides. It's like, oh no, I do not want to be around that person who is searching and searching and searching for me. Like, I feel like I'm in trouble here. So go a little bit easier. Go a little bit easier on yourself. Go a little bit easier on this whole creative energy, this whole creative bug. Creativity is there, okay? It's always a part of you. It's always inside of you. And sometimes it peeks its head out when we calm down a little bit and when we least expect it. So number 2, I'm really not a believer that you can force creativity, but I do think that you can reinforce its magical appearance and help it to appear by the habits that you build. So what do I mean by this? Well, I have found that in some cases, when I'm just like sitting around, putting off whatever I need to do, waiting for inspiration, it tends to end up just being procrastinating on getting started or not doing something in the first place. I'm sitting there waiting for inspiration or waiting for creativity or waiting for motivation. That has not worked for me. I will give you an example. I recently started working on this little side project of fiction. I'm just doing this for fun. I'm not doing anything with it. I'm literally just using it before I go to bed as a way to get myself like writing on this specific vein regularly. And what I found is that it's so often once I get started that I feel really, really inspired and really, really creative. So for me in my work life, how that applies to my work life, how it applies to my creative space for my clients and also the content I'm creating, I use time blocking personally as my creativity tool. And I know you're probably like, that sounds really rigid and not at all creative. But I find that when I set time aside that is specifically for a certain style or project of creative work, like let's say specifically working on this podcast, specifically writing for my clients, specifically writing emails, specifically networking chats and calls, like that is actually how I get the most out of that creative time. I tend to be more creative in the different areas when I time block for it. So you don't have to go that far, but I would recommend looking at creating some habits and routines, like almost like creative dates that you make with yourself daily. It's like one of those things where sometimes when you start pushing the pen, even if you were like, I wasn't feeling creative today, or I wasn't feeling motivated today, or I wasn't feeling inspired today, even if you just sit down and start with like, blah, 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 I don't know what to write, or this is totally and utterly stupid, stuff starts to flow. When you put yourself in the place where you are showing up to do that regularly. And it might take a couple tries at first. Like it might take some reinforcement of you sitting down and making the habit. And even if nothing comes, even if the first day all you write is a sentence, sit down and do it again the next day. Sit down and do it again the next day. So a couple of resources I wanted to offer. First of all, if you ever get a chance to attend something called a gateless writing salon or a gateless writing retreat, please do it. Try it. It is a great example of this. You write to a prompt within a timed container. And it's kind of after you do like this guided meditation or brain relaxation exercise. And I tell you what, I've been there so many times when I'm like, I do not feel creative at all. Like, what am I going to write? I just feel like I'm going to stare at the blank page and not get anything out. And I've even started with before like, my belly is hungry right now. I wish I hadn't signed up for this because I should be working or cleaning my house. By the time that timer dings, I have a masterpiece and it came out of nowhere. It's not quite a masterpiece. It's a rough draft, but it came seemingly out of nowhere. So my point here is sometimes we just need to get started. Sometimes just getting started is how you start to spark that creativity back to life. Even if you're not feeling it, what if you make a date tomorrow that for 15 minutes, you're going to sit down to do that thing? So that's my piece of, okay, I'm not really going to number these because I'm just going to kind of be like going through here, there, and everywhere. But let's call it number 1, number 2, I don't know. When you don't feel inspired or motivated, sit down, get started, because so often, and so many people say this, inspiration and motivation often find you there. They find you when you're getting started. I think it's Pablo Picasso that says inspiration exists, but it has to find you working. Okay, the second resource here is a podcast that my friend Erin Alila of the Talk Copy to Me podcast recently did. And her podcast episode was called Nothing You Write Will Ever Be Good Enough. And she shares how sometimes she goes ahead in the middle of a piece of client copy or copy for herself. She just puts a big blah, blah, blah right into the middle of the piece of copy and just that way she can keep on moving. And I've done this too, where I've kind of highlighted a spot. So I will make sure that there's a link to that episode in the show notes, but this is something, like I said, I use in my emails sometimes too. I will literally write, I'll come back to this later, or I'll figure out a subject line later. And I just put it in or put in something useful here, Emily. That way I can at least get moving and get started. Even if I just set up the pieces one day, I set up the outline or the framework, that's a great step, okay? So that's a really good step. So I guess this tip is how to kind of really focus on setting yourself up for success by creating that habit or routine and just doing something, just getting started by taking steps. Because as you do, you start to prime your brain to expect that power hour or that creative hour or that creative time. And I do swear by time blocking personally. I even do mine on certain days of the week. So if you ever want to talk more about that, I'd love to have that conversation. It's really how my brain gets into, because I don't do really well with lots of task switching. It kind of zaps my creativity. So I really do structure my days and weeks around time blocking and make certain days for certain things so I can maximize that creative time. Okay, I think we're on number 3. Like I said, I didn't really number these, but I do think we're on number 3. So the next idea I wanted to offer to spark creativity is going to be counter to actually getting started. And that is go take a walk, go take a shower. If you always take hot showers, take a cold shower. If you always take cold showers, take a hot shower. If you go a certain direction for your walks, usually go the other way. Walk your dog, walk without your dog, walk in the woods, walk on a street, walk with a friend, walk alone. Just take a walk. Just take a shower. A lot of our creative sparks come from doing one of those 2 activities and just giving your brain a little bit of a break. Number 4, another way to spark creativity inevitably is to do something less creative. I find that this almost builds up this internal pressure. It's like a pressure inside me. I recently was working on this kind of dry client project, and it was more analytical than creative. It wasn't taking much creative energy. It was logical, practical, informational, and not that exciting. And inside, my body was screaming creative ideas at me. I had to just keep jotting them down elsewhere until I could actually act on them because I didn't want to get distracted. But that can be a really great tool to use in your favor to rekindle that creative fire fast. Do something like cleaning or something that you can't actually use your hands for, like driving or folding laundry. Sometimes working on something that is far less creative, cleaning your house, scrubbing your toilet, organizing your closet. That is the key. Doing dishes. That is the key to unlocking a thunderstorm of creativity. So give your hands something to do and pull them away from whatever creative effort you were doing before. And sometimes they just can't help but start coming up with ideas. Number 5 is to take a look at some of your past content. Now, you could actually just go back into your past content, cut and paste it, and use that. That is also an option. Or you could use it and sort of say, what else do I think about this thing? Or how has my perspective on this changed? You could rework it into something entirely new. One thing I love to do to spark creativity is actually go through these old BNI 1 minutes I would write and share when I owned my mattress store, and see how I can turn those old mattress related 1 minutes, because they were almost always a story of some sort. So I love to see how I can turn those old 1 minutes into something relevant for my business today, or the people that are listening to my podcast today, or the people that are reading my blog today. I also love looking back at old blog posts, old emails, letting a new spin get sparked from looking at old me, past me. Okay, 5 years ago I was here. Well, how has my perspective changed now? The other way you could do this is just like perusing the photos on your phone. Like that's a great source of ideas and inspiration and creativity. Or old journals or old emails or old yearbooks, like the tests from college that you have stashed away in a bin in your basement. Okay, is that just me? Maybe it's just me. Anything from the past can help to spark creativity for today. It can spark stories and it can help to inspire you in a new way and come up with an idea that maybe you wouldn't have gotten to before. So take a little trip down your own memory lane and see what sparks. Number 6 is, I'm actually doing good with this numbering thing. I said I wasn't going to, and I'm like on track. Ask a friend, when I listen back, I'll find out if the numbers actually were accurate. Ask a friend or a client, ask someone what they're struggling with. What do they need right now? Do they have a sense of what others might be going through or what others might be finding helpful or useful? Someone actually did this to me recently. She used me as a springboard by asking me a question, and I reflected back what I was hearing from sort of the collective, the entrepreneurship collective, if you will, in a certain area. And off she went to create around that. I also love doing that with my podcast and with my blog and even with the services I come up with, which is why I love reviews, because I love to hear what people are thinking and what they're feeling. And I also love asking questions to my community or my clients. And then like Tigger, I excitedly go create a resource that can help them, help answer those questions. So that's an idea too, is asking your friends, asking your clients, talking to your significant other who's not in the entrepreneurial space at all and like bouncing ideas off them or using that as a starting point. Like I can't even tell you how many times Jason, my husband, has helped me to close the loop on like random stories. I'm like, I don't know what this means yet or what the analogy is here. He like helps to make sense of the jumble in my head. And then I can often take it from there, flush it into a solid creative idea. Okay. Another one for you, a fun one, is to tie up a loose end. Now, this could look like cleaning out your inbox and replying to unreplied emails. It could look like wrapping up a project and sending off the last pieces of a deliverable. It could look actually like paying someone, paying a bill, paying a contractor. Like it's getting something off your list that has been sitting on your list. It could look like calling your dentist and making an appointment, pulling out your credit card and buying yourself a new bra that you've been putting off for 3 years. That's something I recently had to do. Put something in the mail, return a library book, crossing something off your list, or multiple little mundane things, especially those things that suck up that energy in our head, right? Like we're thinking about them. We know we have to do them. We know we have to make that call. It's going to be a pain in the butt. We need to save some energy for it. So getting those things done can be a really great way to free up some of that brain space, free up some of that creativity, and generate more ideas. I kind of think of it as like decluttering your to-do list. Like I do think that decluttering has a very similar effect. So whether you're moving furniture around your house or you're throwing things away, cleaning your closet, cleaning off your desk, purging, moving plants around, like the results are similar. But it's just basically freeing up, it's decluttering your brain, decluttering your to-do list. And as you do, you make room for like new energy to flow and ideas to flow and new things to be generated. All right, number 8, use smells, music, lighting, textures, candles. Set up your actual creative environment to be like this cozy little nook. Or, if you prefer, a really big, expansive area. I use piano music it's not what I would like traditionally listen to as my choice of music, but I use piano music with no words to work on creative projects in my little tiny cozy office. There's something so soothing about it. I've also used like binaural beats or nature sounds. And I think that there's also something called alpha waves, which a lot of people think are really, really helpful for improving concentration and creativity. But a lot of those pieces of music, just without the words, again, it sort of primes my brain to get into that creative mode. Like, okay, now we're doing this. Now we're in idea generation mode. I mean, some of you might do your best work when you're cranking Led Zeppelin or Aerosmith or listening to Ed Sheeran or Katy Perry. I don't know. Just choose what works for you. But it can be really helpful to set your environment up to be kind of like this creative little zone. So whether that means you are listening to music while you work or have a certain smell like lavender or lemon or mint in your diffuser maybe, or the lighting is just right, you have a candle going, like those kind of acts are a great way to kind of prime your brain to get into that creative mode. What I might not suggest here, just as it comes to listening to something, is to multitask and be listening to a podcast or watching a YouTube video or a TED Talk or something. Like, don't try to do those kinds of things while you're trying to be creative. And that leads me to my next one, which is maybe it's time to stop consuming for a little while. Sometimes all that stuff, all that other content that we consume, it can be really, really draining because as we're consuming it, things are happening subconsciously. And those could be good things. They could be really good things, but they also could be more negative things, like comparing ourselves to other people, or just, like I said, like just filling ourselves up with other people's ideas instead of just sitting down and generating some of our own and coming up with our own unique thoughts and ideas. And I think you need a combination of both. Like, I don't think you should be in this little chamber of your own thoughts all the time. I think you should consume intentionally, but I personally know that I've been taking a lot more breaks, and I make my social media time a little bit further and further between. I don't know how that phrase goes, but less these days. And if I'm consuming, it's mostly podcasts and books, conversations with friends, things that I've really, really intentionally chosen. A little bit more than online content, which can sometimes be like the wild, wild west. Like, you don't always know what you're going to get. I've also heard it said that consuming more can help you be more creative, like watching movies and listening to podcasts and reading books. So, and I have a recent example of that too, where like a podcaster I was listening to, it actually did help me come up with more ideas because as I was listening, I was sort of like, oh my God, he missed all of these other great ideas. So it did help to conjure up more ideas. So it might be that you stop consuming for a little while. It might be that you just more intentionally consume, or it might be that you need to consume more. Like if you are completely not feeling creative and you just have not been reading books, you have not been listening to podcasts, you have not been talking to other people, you might need to open that channel back up. Couple more, then we're done. I think we're on number 10. Basically, this one is just about changing up your routine. So sometimes, like I said, we need more routine. And sometimes we need less. Sometimes we get stuck and stagnant, and the key is to change it up. If this is you, if you do get stuck in the same old, try writing a paragraph of sheer and utter fiction. Or if you always write fiction, write something in a memoir style, or write a poem, or a short story, or an essay. Basically do the opposite or completely different from what you usually do. If you always sit down every week and you start with your newsletter and then you do your social media posts, this week, start with your social first. See where that goes. If you start with your social, start with your newsletter first. Go somewhere. Stay home all day. Write in your favorite notebook. Write in your least favorite notebook. Write in something that's unlined. Go to a coffee shop to work. Like, you get the idea. Another one I love is if you haven't tried using prompts yet, prompts might be the exact thing that helped to spark creativity. But if you always use prompts, or you're always following some sort of like social media prompt calendar, don't use one. Just see what pops up. See what wants to come up. If you follow a strict calendar, let it be looser. If you have zero schedule for what the day usually holds, try scheduling a day out. So the idea there is just to literally think of, okay, what is the rut that I'm in? And what do I need to be doing that is different from what I'm doing? Basically, what is the opposite of what I'm doing? The last one is to genuinely take a break and create less. Take something off your plate. Just get rid of something you are pushing yourself to try to create. I did this in the month of June in a couple of different ways. I just sort of stopped worrying about posting when it came to a lot of things. Like, there is a level of consistency I try to uphold. And then there's also like a little bit of a level of like overachieving where I didn't need to be doing what I was doing. So I took that month to say, maybe I don't need to write my usual like 9,000 blogs a month, and I don't need to be generating as much. So I took a step back, I took my foot off the gas, and I started generating less until I felt that desire coming back to generate more. Now, for some of you, this is your natural tendency. Like, your natural tendency is to stop producing. So what I would say is, if that's your natural MO, know yourself and maybe switch it up so that you're not doing that. This was not my natural modus operandi. This is not my natural way of doing things. My natural way of doing things would be to just keep on going, keep pushing. But I found that giving myself a break was exactly what I needed. So I can also see that if you're the kind of person that's always letting yourself off the hook, always giving yourself a break or making excuses or procrastinating, this isn't going to work, and you need to do the opposite. But then I also would say, I guess I would ask you to really consider deeply, why am I dreading this? Why am I putting this off so adamantly? Like, why am I struggling so hard to sit down and do this thing? Do I even really want to be doing it? Do I believe in what I'm doing? Am I passionate about what I'm doing? What is really going on there for you? Because maybe it's a sign that you are just not that into it anymore. And that's okay. Like, maybe you've lost your curiosity about it or your passion behind what you're doing, and that is okay. Or maybe you feel this pressure on you to make every piece matter so much. And there's this pressure on you to sell and to promote and to get people to sign up and buy. It's exhausting, and that can really drain you of your creative energy. And only you can answer those questions. They're not easy questions to answer. But I think that diving in on it a little bit more and really asking yourself, like, what do I need right now, is a good place to start. And don't let that brain trick you, because sometimes what you're like, oh, I need a break. Sometimes you don't need a break. Sometimes you need to sit down, tell yourself you're going to start doing the thing and start doing the thing. And sometimes you really do need a break. So look at it unique to you. As promised, to wrap up, I wanted to give you some resources, and I have 4 for you today. As always, I'll include these links and one to Erin's podcast episode and a couple others that I referenced earlier in the show. Resource number 1 is Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, A Way of Being. My friend Jamie Chapman of Chick Book Creative got me this as a gift recently, and I loved the book. What I love about it is you can sort of just dabble in it day by day. You can read it again and again, and he just says it in a way like none other. And it really does help to get those creative sparks flowing, gives you tons more ideas than I could ever give you in this one episode. Number 2, one of my personal favorite authors is Anne Lamott, and she wrote a book I love called Bird by Bird, Some Instructions on Writing and Life. It is one of my favorite books for helping you to get started and generate creative ideas and write a really, she calls it, shitty first draft. And then something new I've recently been doing called Storytime Hypnosis with my friend Karen Kenny. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I hit a wall in my day, like a total and utter wall, and I had zero creative juice for something. I had to write it for the next day. It was due the next day. In her Storytime Hypnosis, which it's an online event, and it's also available as audios, so you can purchase them and listen to them later. So that's what I did. I signed up for the event, and then I got the replay where I was able to just put my little earbuds in, go melt on my bed like a puddle, and soak up this relaxing hypnosis. And when I was done, I was like, wow, I know the next step. Like, I know exactly what to write. And I sat down and write I did. There was like smoke coming out of my ears when I was done banging away on that keyboard. So I'm going to include a link to that as well. And then lastly, join a community focused on what you're working on. I have one coming up that I built all around creativity in your visibility and marketing efforts. And it's called the Marketing Momentum Lab. It's a 6-week cozy group focused completely and utterly on content creation, increasing our collaborations, creating consistently, and gaining tons of creative ideas and feedback from one another. You even get to practice being creative together and like put it into place live time as we learn and talk about it. So the Marketing Momentum Lab kicks off July 31st. As I said, it's 6 weeks dedicated to your marketing and your visibility and how to get really creative and being out of the box about it. So you can find out more about that at marketingmomentumlab.com. I'll also have that in the show notes. And that is it for today. Please let me know if you try any of these and if they work. And feel free to share feedback and ideas on topics you might be interested in learning more about and diving into so that I can make sure that this podcast is 100% more helpful to you. Next week, I'm going to be sharing on what happens when you show up, when you decide to get visible. And I mean, what really happens. Like, I'm going to tell you the behind the scenes, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I will chat with you then, and I hope you have a great week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Content with Character. If you loved the episode, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast, rate, review, and share it with someone else you know it could help. For more content and visibility tips, visit my blog at emilyaborn.com and be sure to connect with me on Instagram at emilyaborn. I'd love to hear how this inspired you to take action.